The evening sky over New York City glowed with golden light as luxury cars pulled up one after another to the Cole Tech Innovation Gala. It was the social event of the year, hosted by billionaire tech mogul Ethan Cole, known for his charm, ambition, and relentless perfection. Inside the glass-walled ballroom, journalists and investors mingled, expecting a lavish dinner that would unveil Ethan's latest invention, a smart home technology line worth billions. Ethan glanced at his watch, satisfied. "Everything has to be perfect tonight," he said to his assistant, Grace, adjusting his tie. Behind the scenes, Mariah Lopez, his young, soft-spoken nanny, played with little Ella, his daughter, keeping her entertained while the staff prepared. The aroma of food should have filled the air, but the kitchen was strangely silent. "Where's the caterer?" Ethan asked sharply. Grace hesitated, her phone trembling in her hand. "Sir, there's a problem." The smile faded from Ethan's face. "What kind of problem?" he demanded. Grace swallowed hard. "The caterer's truck broke down on the highway. They can't make it. We have no food for the gala." A silence fell, the kind that changes everything. Grace's words hung in the air like a bad omen. Ethan's eyes darkened. "What do you mean, no food?" His voice was calm, but everyone in the room felt the pressure beneath it. The kitchen staff looked helpless. Platters stood empty, tables were half set. The guests were already arriving upstairs, glasses of champagne in hand, expecting the finest meal of their lives. "The chef said they'll refund double," Grace stammered. "But they can't deliver tonight. The truck is stuck near Trenton. No one else can take the order this late." Ethan turned away, rubbing his temples. He could handle stock market crashes, hostile takeovers, and boardroom battles. But public embarrassment? That was different. He muttered, "If this gala fails, I'll lose more than investors. I'll lose credibility." In the corner, little Ella tugged Mariah's sleeve. "Miss Mariah, why is Daddy angry?" Mariah smiled softly. "Because something important went wrong, sweetheart." Upstairs, the hum of laughter began to fade as people noticed the missing dinner service. Grace whispered, "We need a miracle." Mariah looked toward the kitchen door, her heart racing. She wasn't a chef, but she'd grown up cooking for her grandmother's diner. Maybe, just maybe, she could help. Within minutes, panic took over the back rooms of the Cole Tech Innovation Gala. Assistants scrambled through their phones, calling every restaurant, private chef, and catering service within 50 miles. All said the same thing: "We're fully booked." Grace's voice cracked. "Sir, even the Grand Harvest declined. Their kitchen's closed." Ethan slammed his fist lightly against the counter. "We can't tell the guests. Keep the music going. Pour more drinks. Buy us time." His calm exterior began to crumble. Meanwhile, Mariah stood at the doorway, holding Ella's small hand. She watched as trays were cleared, tables were left bare, and staff whispered in fear. In a soft voice, she said, "Mr. Cole, I can help." Ethan barely heard her. "Mariah, please take Ella to her room. This is not your concern." "I mean it, sir," she continued, firmer this time. "I can cook. It may not be fancy, but I know how to make people smile with food." Everyone turned. Grace blinked. "You cook?" Mariah nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I used to help in my grandmother's diner. I can work fast, but I'll need your trust." Ethan looked into her determined eyes, torn between pride and desperation. Finally, he said, "You have 1 hour." The kitchen staff hesitated, unsure if they should let a nanny take over. But Ethan's sharp tone settled it. "Do what she says." Mariah removed her coat, tied an apron around her waist, and took charge with a quiet confidence that surprised everyone. She said, "Grace, please bring every vegetable, spice, and meat left in storage, and clear 2 assistants. I'll need hands." Grace rushed off. The chef stood awkwardly until Mariah smiled gently. "I know this isn't your usual order, but tonight we just need to feed people's hearts, not just their plates." Within minutes, the room filled with the rhythmic sound of chopping, sizzling, and laughter, the kind that comes from people who find hope in chaos. Mariah moved like someone born in a kitchen. She blended flavors instinctively, tasting as she went. A little thyme, more butter. Yes, that's it, she whispered. Upstairs, guests started murmuring about a new aroma drifting from below. Warm, rich, comforting. Ethan peeked through the kitchen door. His jaw tightened as he watched her, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, face glowing with focus. Grace leaned toward him. "Sir, I think your gala's about to be saved." An hour later, the once panicked kitchen had transformed into a symphony of motion and flavor. The tables that were moments from disaster now brimmed with life. Creamy pasta, roasted chicken with herbs, glazed carrots, and a signature dessert Mariah called Heaven's Bite. As the first plates were carried out, a hush fell over the ballroom. Guests exchanged curious looks, wondering where this food had come from. Then came the first bite, and silence turned to applause. "Oh my goodness, this is incredible! Who catered this?" Ethan, standing near the stage, blinked in disbelief. The people who would have left angry were now asking for seconds. Grace whispered beside him, "Sir, the nanny, she really did it." He turned to see Mariah emerge from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. Ella ran to her and hugged her leg proudly. "Daddy, Miss Mariah cooked." Ethan approached, his expression softening. "You saved my reputation tonight, and maybe more than that," he said quietly. Mariah smiled humbly. "I just didn't want to see all your hard work go to waste." That night, while applause filled the hall, Ethan made a silent promise. He would never forget this woman. The next morning, Mariah woke to a knock on her small apartment door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her hands still ached from the night's frantic cooking. When she opened the door, Ethan stood there, in his crisp suit, holding a cup of coffee and a smile that seemed uncharacteristically warm. "Mariah," he began, "I couldn't stop thinking about what you did last night. You saved my event, and my reputation. I owe you." She tried to brush it off. "You don't owe me anything, sir. I just cooked." Ethan shook his head. "No, you didn't just cook. You led. You created calm out of chaos, and every guest asked for your recipe. My daughter adores you. I want you to come work for me full-time." Mariah froze. "At your mansion?" He nodded. "Yes, not as Ella's nanny this time, but as part of my household, a personal chef and caretaker." Her heart raced. It was an opportunity beyond anything she'd ever imagined, yet something in Ethan's steady gaze made her uneasy. There was power in his tone, and an unspoken expectation she couldn't quite read. Still, she smiled faintly and whispered, "If it's to help Ella, then yes, I'll come."
At first, everything felt like a dream. The mansion gleamed, glass walls, marble floors, the aroma of fresh flowers everywhere. Ethan's daughter, Ella, ran into Mariah's arms the moment she arrived. It almost felt like home. But by nightfall, the illusion began to crack. Mariah noticed doors that always stayed locked, even when cleaners passed by. She saw workers whisper and leave hurriedly when Ethan entered the room. One evening, she overheard a strange argument. Ethan on the phone, his voice cold and sharp, saying, "They don't need to know where the funds came from. Just make sure it's approved." At dinner, he insisted she join him at the table. "You've earned your place here," he said, pouring her a glass of expensive wine. When she politely declined, he smiled thinly. "No one says no to me, Mariah. Not here." The room grew quiet. Even the candles flickered as if uneasy. That night, as she lay in her new luxurious room, Mariah stared at the chandelier above her bed, its reflection glimmering like 1,000 eyes. She realized the mansion wasn't just beautiful, it was watching. And beneath all that wealth and glamour, something dark stirred. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion's rhythm swallowed Mariah whole. She rose before dawn, cooked breakfast for Ethan and his guests, and tutored little Ella in the afternoons. Life was structured, polished, almost perfect. But beneath that perfection, something gnawed at her spirit. Ethan would often ask her to do things that went far beyond a nanny's duty, hosting private dinners where shady guests discussed investments in hushed tones, signing for deliveries she wasn't allowed to open, even comforting his anxious business partners when meetings turned sour. One evening, as she prepared a late supper, Ethan came into the kitchen. "You've been a blessing, Mariah, but loyalty is everything here. I expect silence, no questions, no hesitation." His gaze was steady, the air thick with unspoken warning. Mariah forced a smile. "Of course, sir." But her chest tightened. This wasn't the peace she dreamed of. It was a gilded cage. She had traded her freedom for comfort, her conscience for safety. That night, as she lay awake, she whispered, "Lord, is obedience to fear still obedience?" In that quiet darkness, she knew something had to change soon. The morning started like any other. Golden sunlight spilling through the glass walls, the smell of coffee drifting through the halls. But something in Mariah's spirit felt heavy, almost prophetic. Ethan had scheduled another exclusive dinner that evening, this one with government officials. "Make sure everything's perfect," he told her, "and wear something that stands out. You're part of the impression." She froze. Part of the impression? When the night came, the guests arrived in sleek cars. The laughter was loud, the deals whispered. Ethan leaned in close during dinner, his voice soft but sharp. "Smile more, Mariah. They're watching." She did. But inside, she was breaking. Later, one of the guests made an inappropriate remark. Ethan laughed it off, then looked at Mariah as if to remind her to stay silent. That was it. She excused herself, went to her small room, packed her bag, and stared at the city lights outside. No job, no security, she thought, but at least I'll have my peace. At dawn, she left a note on the counter. "Thank you, Mr. Carter, but my soul cannot serve where my heart is not free." She walked out, with nothing but courage. The streets of New York were loud, indifferent, and cold. Mariah walked for hours, clutching her small bag and the little money she had left. Every "Help Wanted" sign felt like a door that closed once she approached. By late afternoon, she sat on a park bench, hungry and unsure where to go next. That's when a calm voice interrupted her thoughts. "You look like you could use a warm meal," said a man in a gray coat. His name was Daniel Hayes, modest, well-spoken, and kind. He owned a small family restaurant downtown. "I'm short on help. You can start tonight if you'd like." Something in his tone made her trust him. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. The restaurant was nothing like Ethan's mansion. It was warm, with laughter, chatter, and the smell of fresh bread. Mariah cooked again, freely, joyfully. Daniel noticed her skill and compassion. "You've got a gift," he said one evening. "Maybe we could build something together." Mariah's heart stirred. A new life seemed possible, one with kindness, simplicity, maybe even love. But as fate would have it, kindness often comes with hidden costs. Weeks turned into months, and Mariah found peace working at Daniel's restaurant. Her dishes became customer favorites, creamy soups, homemade pies, and that signature rosemary chicken that reminded her of the night she saved the Billionaire's gala. Daniel admired her dedication. One quiet evening after closing, he said, "Mariah, I've never met anyone like you. You bring warmth wherever you go." His voice was tender, his eyes steady. "I don't have much, but I'd like you to stay, not just as my cook, but by my side." Her heart fluttered. After the chaos of Ethan's mansion, Daniel's world felt gentle and real. She hesitated, remembering the pain of power and manipulation. But Daniel seemed sincere, a man of simple dreams. "I just want peace," she said softly. "Then let's make it together," he smiled. They built a life of quiet joy. Morning coffee, laughter in the kitchen, shared recipes scribbled on napkins. For a time, Mariah believed she'd found her forever home. Until one morning, she discovered something that made her world crumble again. A truth Daniel had hidden, one that would shatter the fragile peace she had fought to rebuild. Mariah was sorting through Daniel's office receipts one quiet afternoon when an unfamiliar envelope caught her eye. It was addressed to Daniel Graham, but the return address froze her heart. Ethan Sterling Holdings. Hands trembling, she pulled out the letter. Inside was a contract signed months ago, showing Daniel had received a large payment from Ethan. The note clipped to it read, "Make sure she doesn't come back." Her chest tightened. Everything she'd believed, the kindness, the care, the second chance, collapsed in a single breath. Daniel hadn't stumbled into her life. He'd been paid to keep her away. When Daniel walked in, she was sitting on the floor, the letter in her hand, tears streaking down her face. "Mariah, I can explain," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "You knew all along? You took money to keep me from going home?" He stepped forward. "It wasn't like that. At first, yes, I took it, but then—" She rose, her voice breaking. "But then you let me believe it was love." She walked out that night, the same way she had left Ethan's house months ago, but this time her heart carried twice the weight.
Rain poured as Mariah stood at the massive iron gates of Ethan Sterling's mansion, the same place she'd fled months ago. Her clothes were drenched, her face pale, and in her arms, her sleeping baby, Ella, murmured softly. She pressed the intercom, her voice trembling. "Please, tell Mr. Sterling, it's Mariah." Moments later, the gates opened. The familiar drive, lined with glistening oaks, stretched before her like a memory she didn't want to relive. When the front door opened, Ethan appeared, older somehow, wearier. His eyes widened at the sight of the baby. "Mariah, you came back?" She nodded, holding Ella tighter. "I didn't know where else to go." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You should never have left without saying goodbye. You gave me no choice, but I'm not here to argue. I just need a job and a roof over my child's head." For a long, painful silence, Ethan said nothing. Then, with a sigh that carried regret and something deeper, he gestured toward the door. "Come in, Mariah. Both of you." As she stepped inside, she didn't realize this return would change both of their lives forever. The mansion hadn't changed, but something in it had. The old cold halls felt warmer, quieter, maybe because Ella's tiny laughter filled the space that had long echoed with loneliness. Ethan found himself watching the child more than he wanted to admit. At first, it was just curiosity, the way her eyes sparkled like Mariah's, the way she'd crawl toward the kitchen whenever she smelled something cooking. But soon, it became something else, something he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, as Mariah stirred a pot of soup, Ethan entered quietly. "She likes you," she said without looking up. "I think she likes my tie, or maybe it's the color." He joked, kneeling beside the baby who was tugging at it. Mariah smiled faintly. "Maybe she just knows good people." He paused, surprised. "Good people? I wasn't sure you thought I was one of those." "I didn't," she said honestly, her tone softening. "But people change. Maybe I did too." For the first time, he saw in her eyes something other than defiance. Forgiveness. And in that kitchen, surrounded by the aroma of her food and the giggles of her child, Ethan Sterling felt something he hadn't known since his late wife's death. Peace. Weeks turned into months, and what began as a silent arrangement blossomed into something unspoken but deeply felt. Mariah cooked, cared for Ella, and brought laughter back into Ethan's own sterile mansion. The staff whispered that the house felt alive again. One evening, Ethan walked into the kitchen to find Mariah singing softly while feeding Ella. Her voice was tender, full of warmth, a sound he hadn't realized he'd missed in his life. "Mariah," he began, his tone serious yet gentle, "you've done more for this home than any amount of money could buy." She turned, startled. "Mr. Sterling, I'm just doing my job." He shook his head. "No, you're doing much more. You brought life back into this place, back into me." She froze, unsure where he was going. "What are you saying?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I know I've made mistakes. With you, with how I treated people, but I want to make it right. I'd like you to stay, not as an employee, but as family. I want to help raise Ella, together." Tears welled in Mariah's eyes. For the first time, someone saw her, not as a nanny, not as a mistake, but as a woman with worth. The mansion buzzed with quiet gossip. The staff couldn't help but notice the change, the way Ethan lingered in the kitchen longer than usual, the laughter that now filled the dining room, and how Mariah's little girl, Ella, toddled freely through the grand halls like she'd always belonged there. "Have you heard?" whispered Clara, the head housekeeper, to the gardener. "Mr. Sterling treats that nanny like she's the lady of the house." "Maybe she is," the gardener replied, smirking. "You can't buy joy, and that woman brought it back." Mariah, unaware of the whispers, focused on her duties, but she sensed something shifting. Ethan wasn't just grateful anymore. He was attentive, protective, and quietly admiring. He'd often find reasons to sit with her during meals or help with Ella's bedtime routine. One evening, Mariah caught him watching her with a soft smile as she read Ella a bedtime story. "What?" she asked, blushing slightly. He chuckled. "Nothing. I just forgot what peace felt like." Mariah didn't know how to respond. Deep down, a storm of emotions brewed: gratitude, fear, and a flicker of something more dangerous: hope. The night felt different, elegant, expectant. Ethan had insisted on hosting a small dinner in the mansion's grand dining room. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's soft glow, the air scented with Mariah's rosemary chicken and fresh-baked bread. Mariah, wearing a simple navy dress, moved gracefully between the table and kitchen. Ella's giggles echoed as Ethan carried her proudly, introducing her to guests from his business circle. But all eyes kept drifting back to Mariah, her calm, her poise, her quiet glow. When the guests had gone, the silence felt strangely intimate. Ethan poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider and sat across from her. "You saved tonight. Again," he said softly. "You've said that before." "Yes," he admitted, "but I don't think I've ever told you what that really means." He leaned closer, eyes steady. "You didn't just save a dinner or an event. You saved me, Mariah. You reminded me what home feels like." Her heart pounded. "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "Then don't," he replied gently. "Just stay." For a moment, the world stood still, a single heartbeat between 2 people who had lost and found themselves again. Weeks after that dinner, the mansion felt alive again. Laughter, soft music, and the scent of homemade food filled rooms that once echoed with emptiness. Mariah had become more than a nanny. She was family. Even the staff noticed how the billionaire, once cold and detached, smiled more often. Then one crisp autumn morning, as leaves swirled across the driveway, Ethan called everyone into the dining room. He looked nervous, a rare sight. "I have an announcement," he began, his voice warm but steady. Mariah stood at the back, holding Ella's hand. "I've spent years building companies, buying luxury, and chasing success. But none of that compares to what this woman taught me: kindness, humility, and love that expects nothing in return." He turned toward her. "Mariah, I don't just want you to cook for my home. I want you to be my home." The room fell silent. Even Ella gasped, her little hand squeezing Mariah's. Tears filled Mariah's eyes. "Ethan, are you sure?" He smiled softly. "I've never been more sure of anything." And as he knelt, slipping a ring from his pocket, everyone realized the story that began with disappointment ended with destiny.